Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Svelte. I am your host today, Enrico. Hey, and today we're going to go over the things that happen on Discord and in the Svelte ecosystem. Starting with our agenda, we have a changelog to cover, some quick facts and announcements, and by some I mean one, a community showcase, a special one, followed with a discussion and a couple of questions and answers. So you know why you're here. You're here for the changelog. Let's go. So coming up in the changelog, we have some Svelte 5 features and updates, and also a SvelteKit update. In Svelte 5, there's a new add unstate utility function. I looked into this briefly, and it looks like this. So in the documentation, you will find unstate. This is something you can set when you're utilizing state, but you want your effect to untrack or unstatify something. Seems like a good idea because sometimes you're utilizing, well, the example given here is structured clone. Structured clone is an excellent utility if you want to copy an object properties and not mutate the original. So it's a full copy, but you don't want to do reactive updates. So unstate helps you untrack things. And that's Svelte 5. There are, of course, many fixes that I will not cover, many breaking changes that I will not cover, because Svelte 5 is, after all, an alpha release. Hello, Fabian, and hello, everyone. Come say hi. More changelog. We've got SvelteKit 1.27.7. So there's, for those of you utilizing Svelte 5 and SvelteKit, you know the Svelte starter where you do npm create svelte at next or at latest. It is possible to set Svelte 5, which is alpha, and I think they renamed the CLI recently from beta to alpha. It is, in fact, an alpha. But the fix here is the URL query string was not working very well with Cloudflare users. If you have a trailing slash and you want to retain query parameters when you're doing a redirect, for some reason, SvelteKit wasn't passing in the query params after your redirect. But in this patch, it does. Very related to this is the adapter Cloudflare update. So if you are a Cloudflare SvelteKit developer, you probably want the patch in SvelteKit as well as the adapter patch, because both of those things help with passing query params through to redirected URLs that utilize trailing slashes. Oh, that's a mouthful. Okay. Also, this is not a noteworthy change, but the fact that Svelte Migrate has been bumped to 1.2.8 means things are happening. Svelte Migrate is this really cool utility that detects your versions of Svelte installed and helps you do migrations such as Svelte 3 to Svelte 4. You can definitely look forward to this being used for the migration between Svelte 4 to Svelte 5. But nothing noteworthy today. Just keep this in the back of your heads. And that's the changelog. Let's go to quick facts and announcements. Here's a small announcement. SvelteRadio.com. Check it out if you haven't. There are some new episodes that have been released. You may listen to Svelte Radio on your favorite apps of choice. It is also available on the Svelte Society YouTube channel where you're watching this live stream right now. Yes, that one. So go check out Svelte Radio. And that's quick facts and announcements. But what's this? We're moving on to Community Showcase. Please give a warm welcome to very special guests, part of Svelte Society. We have, first of all, Stanislav. Welcome.
Hello.
And
Test.
And Willow.
Hey.
Ghost in parentheses. Welcome, you two. And what have you been working on?
So we've been working on Advent of Svelte. As some of you might have seen in the Discord and on Twitter. It's just a daily challenge for you to do up till Christmas Eve, themed kind of around Svelte and web dev in general, really.
Awesome. Well, why don't you take it away and show everyone what you two have been developing here at Advent of Svelte.
Yeah, so I thought today we would talk a little bit about Advent of Svelte and to also showcase some of the cool solutions that we've seen across these first week that we've had. I don't know if we're gonna do this every week, but at least I thought today it would be kind of fun to show a few solutions. So Advent of Svelte, like you said, Willow, it's kind of like this daily challenge. If you've done something like Advent of Code before, it's kind of like that, but Svelte themed. So I thought we could maybe look at some of the challenges. Here's the website. You can find it. Where can you find the website, Willow?
advent.sveltesociety.dev.
Thank you. And if you scroll down here, we have the different challenges, and I just wanted to show off a few of them. So like for day one, we had this kind of data filtering challenge where Santa has compiled a list of children who are either naughty or nice. And so we had a lot of really like creative solutions to that. We had one by Ollie JT from the community. I'm just going to say everyone's Discord names when referring to people. So, and he did one, which was pretty simple here. He's filtering the list by nice and, I guess, naughty children. And the cool thing about this one is he used runes, which is really funny to see right away that we have somebody trying out this new tech. And then I also wanted to showcase Paolo. Paolo, as you might know, from co-host here at Svelte, at This Week in Svelte. He made a really funny solution, which uses animations. We're going to see it like start in just a second. So there you go. So you get one child at a time, and then it kind of sorts them into either like a naughty or nice. So it kind of becomes like a little bit of a surprise. I thought this was very creative. And if I recall, this is also actually possible. Somehow this runs without JavaScript, although I do not know how he managed to do that. All right. And what about day 2, Willow? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so day 2 was a challenge about creating a cookie eating counter. And we had so many really creative solutions here. I think the first one we want to show off is by Bert.
Let's see here. Yes. Here we go.
Okay, so this one, if you can just press the eat cookie button and it will keep counting up. And then if you spam it for long enough, we can see it change.
Oh.
And then we keep getting images. If you spam it up to, I think it's 140, then Santa gets 2L and must start again.
That's cool. I don't know if we can go that far, but yeah, this is available in the Discord for those who want to try it out.
Yeah, there's a list of threads in the Discord if you want to post your submissions there or look at other people's. And then the next one we have is by Navi the Coder. And it's like a little game. You can use your keyboard to interact with it.
Yeah, this is a very creative take on a cookie clicker, I think. All right, so let's go to day 3, where we had a challenge about balancing Santa's sleigh. So he had a bunch of presents for children, and each present has a different, or gift has a different weight, and you have to kind of make some sort of UI to help Santa balance it all. And here I want to highlight a solution by Jesus from the Discord. I thought this one was really nicely done. So here we have a list of all the children, and as you add their gifts or presents to the load to the sleigh, it will, after some time, you can see, it will like overflow, and you can see here the total weight that the sleigh can handle. Let's see if we can make it overflow. You actually can't add more after you've filled it up to the max. And somebody even made a algorithm that would like automatically like divide it up into different runs. It was like completely crazy. Yeah, that's day 3.
So for day 4, we had a challenge of tracking Santa's heart rate from this live endpoint we had. So you could see in real time as it changed. And I think we have one solution we want to highlight here by Domsky. I think this kind of looks like Sacchetti, I think. I'm not 100% sure. But as you can see, this is getting the data in real time as you're on the page, and then displaying some really cool information and this pretty graph.
Yeah, this one was really cool. It's cool to see people use different frameworks. Some people just like, we're going to see some of that. They just like could do everything by themselves. And some people, they use like frameworks to make it look like really cool and enterprising. Can you say that? Is that a word?
Yeah.
All right. For day 5, we have, actually, I'm not sure about this challenge, Willow. Maybe you want to take this one because I'm not sure what this challenge is about.
Okay, so the whole point was that we have the elves, they have to do their tasks, but they're behind schedule. And so we have a list of tasks, and it was during the day, it was live data. It's all out now, so the data won't change again. But they were either the tasks were either created toy or wrap present, and the whole idea was to create a dashboard where you can take this data in live and view the productivity of the elves, and you can see like how long they take on average to complete tasks and stuff. And so we have a submission by Storky.
Storky, who is an ambassador, I believe.
Yes. They are, and you can see we've got like the toys created, the average times, the events, and this graph as well.
Well, yeah, I guess the graph doesn't show anymore because it was a time limited sort of.
Yes. Yeah.
Very cool. Let's see the next one. The next one is it's called the Mistletoe Metronome. That one was, well, there's a backstory to all of these that they totally make sense if you read it, we promise. But it was about building a metronome counter. So you would tap, and it would show you how fast you're basically tapping. And here we have one solution by, let's see, who made this one? It was Sneisen. I apologize for pronouncing that wrong. So this one, and here's you see some example of some really cool like Web 1.0 graphics. I love this. This is so beautiful. So when you press this button, it's actually going to tell you how fast you're pressing it. And what I really loved about this solution is that it actually finds songs that have the same BPM as you're tapping, and it will actually like let you listen to them on Spotify. I thought it was just so fun and creative.
That's amazing.
Incredible. All right. And then the final day for this showcase. You want to take that, Willow?
Yeah, so this one was about Santa needing to communicate over the wire with an eccentric reindeer trainer friend of his. And we needed to use Morse code. So the challenge was to create a Morse code translator. And then if you had time, you can use the web audio API to make it come to life with sound. So he have a submission here from Withered Flowers. This one, if you...
So this one will convert it, and unfortunately you won't hear it, but it's actually playing out the Morse code in my ears right now, which is really cool.
I also remember seeing another solution where, as it played it, it highlights the parts of the string, which was quite cool. So yeah, there's some such creative solutions. Really, far more than I ever expected there to be. So to be honest.
And we're only 7 days in. Today is the 8th day. It's 24 days in total, so there's plenty of challenges still to come for those who want to join. And if you're seeing this now and you want to join, don't worry, you don't have to do all of them. They don't usually like rely on each other, so you can kind of jump in and jump out whenever you want. I also want to show that some people really took it to the next level, and they've been creating basically like dashboards for their submissions. So here you see, I'm not sure whose this is. I'm really sorry. It's one of the people who we highlighted earlier, and they actually made a dashboard to show off all their different solutions that they've made. Thank you, Willow. Yeah. So any other words you want to say before we say goodbye for today?
I don't think so. If you come and hang out in the Discord, ask any questions, and if you want us to maybe show off your submissions, then put them in the threads each day. There's a list in the pinned messages if you can't find them.
Wonderful. Thank you too for creating Advent of Svelte and for showcasing this past week. Maybe we'll see you again in an upcoming week.
That would be really fun.
All right, everyone, give Willow and Stanislav a hand for arranging this. Check them out. Check out all of the updates on Discord. It's in the community category under Advent of Svelte. I'm scrolling through Discord to triple check the name. Yes, Advent of Svelte. See you next time. And that was Community Showcase. Moving on to, it's been a long time, but I think it's time for a discussion. And today's discussion is going to be about validating forms, or rather, a light exploration on validating forms. I won't go deep into examples on how to do this in SvelteKit, but rather just to discuss different ways people are validating forms today, and perhaps some upcoming features you may want to utilize in the future. I don't intend to draw diagrams, but I do have an agenda here for the discussion. So there's passwords requiring special treatment. There are things like one-time codes, a little accessibility tip for everybody, client-side validation versus server-side validation, and this new thing called ValidityState. So let's go over these things. And in the chat, please share your experiences with validation, and maybe we'll cover that as well in a time box. So starting with passwords. Passwords, I always consider passwords to be a special exception when it comes to validating inputs. So let's say you have an input component or an input convention or even a validation library. Passwords are very unique because usually you set restrictions on them, either arbitrary ones like must have an uppercase letter, or you're using something fancier like entropy checks, where is it sufficiently long that it cannot be hacked by a quantum computer. Whatever boat you're swimming on, those are the kinds of exceptions you have to build into a special password input most of the time, at least from my experience. And then there's one-time codes. Have you ever logged into an application like GitHub and it sends you a authentication app one-time password or even a text message, like a 6-digit number? Sometimes on the internet, you'll find 6 inputs, like 6 distinct and separated inputs where you have to input 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the input will go to the next one if it's built correctly. But my argument for today is that's a lot of work. And why do that when you can have one input? And what does a screen reader feel when it goes from input to input? How can you know that the past numbers you just inputted are the correct ones when you're seizing focus from the user and moving on to the next? So I would like to recommend that try to use one input for those fields. And when it comes to validation, here's the meat of the discussion, or rather the big motivating question. Should you do client-side validation? Should you do server-side validation? Should you do both separately? Or should you do server-side validation and then have your client send requests to the server to reuse your server validation? It depends. It depends because sometimes you have a light server or a serverless situation where constantly validating on keystroke may be expensive or time-consuming. Maybe the user experience is not very good because the user has to wait a few hundred milliseconds to get a response after they've typed. Even with a debouncer, even with efficiently batched requests, the feedback is not instantaneous. But with server-side validation, it is the most valid or the most correct. And most of the time when you submit a form, you want server-side validation 100% of the time. So if it's just a regular form and you click submit, definitely validate your form before you do server actions like putting things into a database, because you need to validate your inputs, then trust it. So we have a comment here saying, I like doing both. Thank you, Osama, for speaking up. So I like doing both to save the bandwidth. Yeah, and most of the time you do. I don't have a confident answer today about like the development overhead and the weight involved with doing both server and client-side validation. However, doing both is most of the time ideal because you have the client-side validation with instantaneous feedback. That's good. Speaking of instantaneous feedback, should you give validation error feedback on keystroke, or should you give it on change? Because some people might think, oh yeah, on keystroke, definitely. Because when you enter something, you want to know the moment you get it wrong. Maybe not actually, because the moment you get things wrong, it'll be difficult to know when you get things right, especially if you get annoying screen reader prompts saying your input is wrong while you're typing your own name. Your input is wrong. Next key. Your input is wrong. Next key. That's a little bit annoying. However, if you do it on change, that's often good enough because you'll enter your input and then you press tab key to go to the next input. then you get instantaneous feedback from the previous input if there's validation errors client-side. Now let's talk about validity state. This is a light exploration. I actually don't know what this is until I looked it up. So validity state is a built-in browser API. According to Baseline, this new standard where it tells you this is an evergreen feature, Baseline suggests that it's cross-browser compatible. You can use this today, but what does it even do? Validity state is sort of a set of methods that allow you to tell your inputs that they're bad, and you use built-in browser checks. I think I have an example right here. So it says here, am I zooming in enough? I'm never zooming in enough. I would like you to provide me with an email address. So I'm going to enter nothing. Now I'm going to type in an invalid email, such as no thanks. It's highlighted in red. If I click on submit, some of you may recognize this tooltip popover thing. This is very similar to the native HTML required popover. It says, I am expecting an email address. That's a custom message put there by the validity state API. So with validity state, you can tell the browser built-in methods, hey, when there's an error here, I want it to say this. And this way you can give hints when there's a change or a form submission. Okay, Grish has a tip for us. First round should be on blur or on submit. If a field then displays an error, it should reevaluate on keystroke. From my experience, this has the best user experience. Yeah, so the proposal here is you submit your form, you get your errors, and then when you go to the input that has an error, the moment you start entering a new input, you can wipe away the invalid state until the user unfocuses or submits again. And doing this right is a bit of work. Validating, it's difficult to discuss the user experience and like the developer experience because this is actually in itself, in its own right, a very complicated topic. But it's good to see some tips flying around here in the discussion. Maybe in a future week, we can have a deeper example. It also depends on the field. Example, a username conflict should not be evaluated on keystroke. That's right. And as some of us know, when you're logging into a website, you probably don't want a 404 error because that's a security vulnerability. If I'm logging into a site or I'm trying to attack somebody and try different email addresses, if the input keeps telling me user doesn't exist, I know the user doesn't exist. But if it just says something generic like username and password don't match, that's more secure because you're protecting your user base from being hacked. And that, I guess, goes in line with passwords and logging in gets special treatment. Everything else gets a more generic but a good user experience. So I'll wait around for a couple seconds. If anyone wants to ask questions about this light exploration on input validation, please let me know. So there's also invalid credentials. Yes. And of course, yeah, we all agree forms are more work than we think they are. Simon writes, I like to hook into the validity state flags when enhancing the validations with JS. So you mostly just define and use the inbuilt validation attributes. Yeah, so here we have a user of validity state already. I only discovered it today, so maybe I'll make use of it in the future. I think the least we can all do, and I'm giving myself like a break here, is the least we can do is let the user submit the form, have your backend validate it, and send errors to the client. At the very least, do that. It's not the worst user experience because at least you're telling them what the errors are. You have an error summary dialog somewhere near the submit button. So after you submit the form, if JavaScript is not available, you can server render an error page or the same form with errors. Your individual inputs can have errors. You can progressively enhance them to remove the errors on input or the moment they focus and change it. And then when the user submits again, all your validations happen on the server. So if you have a tight deadline or you just want to submit a form quickly, the least you can do is that, server validation on entire form submission. Progressively enhancing this is a lot of work. Making it good, making it work well with screen readers, it's a lot of work. But we can probably go deeper into that another day. Alrighty. So that's it for comments. I guess it's time to move on to... Oh yeah, actually, I had a coded example right here. So the example I shared a moment ago where the email was invalid, This is the source code. This is a vanilla JavaScript example. So the form input on line 24 is the email. And then on 31, you can have an input listener. And if the validity is incorrect, you can set a custom validity message. This is the custom message you saw earlier. I am expecting an email address. So if I do no thanks, it says I am expecting an email address. That is because of the built-in browser API right there. I would imagine hooking this into Svelte is a little bit easier because instead of adding an event listener, you can probably make a reusable action or another event listener. Very nice. So discussions aside, let's move on to questions and answers. Some of you have questions. Maybe I have answers to them. The first question was, how do I suppress ESLint warnings in Svelte? If you start a new SvelteKit project, it'll come with this utility here, which is ESLint plugin Svelte. What are these things? Let's go over that. So ESLint is a linting tool, and it kind of blurs the line between being a linting tool and being a formatter, because a linting tool tells you if your syntax doesn't conform to a certain style. And it also does things like checks for potential errors. Kind of like if there was a Venn diagram of what the TypeScript server does and what ESLint does, there's a little bit of overlap in between because both of them do some form of security checking, some form of type validations. But most of the time, ESLint's core responsibility is to make sure that the style is consistent. This is especially useful if you are on a large team and you don't want your team to submit change requests and constantly reformat lines of code. It kind of wastes time during code review. You want to make sure that things are indented consistently. Ternaries are new lines if they're at a certain character length. This is where ESLint and Prettier work together. But the question for today was about how to suppress warnings. And a good example here is no @HTML tags. So in Svelte, we have a tool called @HTML, and this will take an HTML string and fully render it. There is a concern about security. So the default is don't ever use @HTML. But sometimes you want to use @HTML because the string is trusted, either because you validated it on the server or you hard-coded an HTML string provided by your component and you fully trust it. So what do you do in those situations? How do you suppress the warning? I have an example. So over here, in my card component, I've enabled ESLint svelte/no @HTML tags. This is the syntax you use to enable it for a component. You can also do it globally in an ESLint config file. And down here, we want to suppress this warning because I trust the name prop. And you can do this. So on line 12, I added a comment, ESLint disable next line svelte/no @HTML tags. For this one instance, on this one line, I want to suppress the ESLint warning. And there you go. I've achieved that. ESLint disable next is commonly used in JavaScript. So typically you'll use it here, like ESLint disable next line. And that disables any warnings on the next line, unless you add a space after and specify which ESLint rule you want to suppress. That's the typical JavaScript scenario. But in Svelte, you use HTML comments. Very similar, but slightly different. Yeah, ESLint's job is to be annoying. That is mostly true. It's sort of like we're developers of our own project. We install ESLint, which is kind of like a metaphor for I want to put these rakes everywhere. And I hope that I step on those rakes and I hope they hit me in the face. Maybe that's one way to interpret it. And that's one question, but we have another one. The question was sending events from parent to child. How do I do this? So in Svelte, sometimes you want your child component to tell the parent, hey, something happened. And we easily do this with events. You can either dispatch a custom event or you can forward events, such as forwarding on click, and then your parent component listens to on click. But what about reverse? What if your parent component wants to tell the child component something and then to do something in reaction to that? We have a demonstration. So today I'm going to share a technique that probably you shouldn't reach for right away, but it's a bit lesser known, and it's called bound functions. So in this card demonstration, I want to edit this card. I click on Edit Card. And the edit card button is right here on my parent page. And when I click on that, the card component turns from static content into an editable form field. So I can say my name is hello or whatever. When I click all done, the card state changes. This is not a fully functional demo, clearly, but what just happened? So on line 24, I have my editable card, and I'm doing a few things. I'm binding the edit state, or is it state? It might be something else. Here's the card component itself. On line 5, we have an edit prop, but it's defined as a function. And I'm using bound functions to call this function to manage internal state. Let's say, for example, not just a card, but let's say you have a table component or a very complicated component with very complicated state or state machines even. And instead of forwarding all the props that handle the component state, you could instead forward a single function. So this edit function does a few things. Editing is a variable on line 13. This is the internal state for, is the card in edit mode? Is the card not in edit mode? I want to set it to true. I want to await a tick, and I want to focus on the name field. On line 20, I'm using bind this, and I'm binding the instance of the input to the name field variable here. And I'm calling focus. I'm doing all of these things in my editable card, which is great because I'm encapsulating state and other internal properties. And all I'm exposing to the parent page is this edit function. So I did exactly that. On line 25, I'm taking the edit function, which is a prop. I'm assigning it to a variable in the parent page called edit card. So edit card is defined on line 10. It's nothing. All it's doing is adding two-way binding to the function. So all I need to do is click on edit card, and there's an on-click listener right here in line 21. On-click edit card. I click edit card. I'm now in edit mode because in the card, it called this function. So this is one way for the parent to tell the child to do something. You can have a function handle internal state in your component, and the parent page can use binding to reuse that function and call it. There are alternatives to this. You don't have to use bound functions. I find it useful if you have a lot of heavy state, like this is just 3 lines of code. What if you have 30 lines of code in your component? And you want your parent page, well, maybe this is personal preference, but in my applications, especially SvelteKit applications, I prefer if the page handles database fetching, form submissions. And that's why in this example, I have the form on line 23. The parent page has the form element. The component supplies form fields. And this way I can use form actions, I can use enhance, and the parent page is fully responsible for fetching data, handling data. The component is just for displaying stuff. It doesn't do any business logic. So that's the advantage I see here. Alternatively, you could use a store. I'm not going to live code that, but you could instead create a module, and you can create a writable store. And if the parent page updates the store, the child component can import the store and react to that. That's another way for the parent to communicate with the child. Hope that was useful. After this demonstration, you can find this REPL in the YouTube description below later today or tomorrow. And if anyone has any questions, I'll stick around for a few seconds. Maybe we can go over that, but hopefully this helps. Maybe. And yes, another good alternative, thank you, Grish, is passing a function via context. Your parent component can, of course, use setContext, and your child component can receive something using getContext. Passing a function, I haven't tried it, but I trust you, and I'm sure that's very possible. You can also pass a writable store via context, and that works very well. You can also do deep communication down to componentry. So exactly, if you're not, I do my best personally to make sure that something is highly composable. So on my parent page, it's great for me to have the form, and every component I need to use is actually utilized here on the parent page, highly composable. But let's say you have a few components deep. Sometimes you just do because the component is composing other components. If that's the case, then context works exceptionally well because you define the context once in your parent, and you can get the context from any child component. This is better than duplicating forms, one for add and one for edit. I hope this is I hope by that you mean this example is good because I'm providing fields in my component, but I only have one form on the parent page. I hope that's what you mean by that. But yeah, that's something I'm trying to achieve here as well, because making things highly composable not only makes your components more reusable, but it actually makes them easier to maintain, because when you're in your editable card, all the card has to do is focus on internal state. And you can expose some functions or also do what Grish suggested with context. And that way they can manage themselves rather than the parent page managing the card and managing all of the props and exposing 5 or 10 props just to manage. For example, what if the form is submitting? You want to show a spinner. What if this is happening? Better to simplify that and better to keep the component state internal. At least that's what we think today. Maybe not tomorrow, but that's it. Thank you all for listening today. And thank you for tuning into This Week in Svelte. Maybe we'll have more Advent of Svelte to share next week, but that's all I got for now. So take care and thank you. Bye now.